Good evening, good morning, and good afternoon from wherever all of you are joining us. This is one of the series of the RC07, the Research Committee for the IPSA, and we focus on gender and politics, different discussions, from varying sectors within the gender space. And today we have. Two people from an organization that I've been closely following, the Red Dot Foundation and a Safe City project as well. I had a chance actually last year to speak on the gender diversity from a gender diversity perspective on the hindrances or accessibility to humanitarian aid in conflict zones. That was hosted by Safe City and the Red Dot Foundation. So this is like kind of coming a bit of full circle. Camilla and Soumya, nice to have you over here. I'll give an introduction for the audience about who you are and what you do with the organization, and then we'll move on to your presentations. Camilla Gomide is the tech and data product manager of she specializes in technology and data. She's a project strategist and an advocate for gender equality and social impact. At Red Dot Foundation Global, she leads initiatives to combat gender-based violence in 17 countries through data collection and analysis. In her current role, Camilla uses data-driven insights to promote safer cities through the Safe City app and leads climate and gender research in Brazil to understand the impact of climate crisis on the security of girls and women. Soumya Hariharan, who is also joining her, is the program and outreach manager. She is a product designer by profession and deeply passionate about gender and development work. She led ground operations for the Faridabad project with Red Dot Foundation, where she worked closely with communities to mobilize people, conduct safety surveys, collect data, and support impactful local interventions and collaborations. For those who don't know, Safe City is a platform that documents sexual harassment and abuse in public spaces. And yeah, so welcome Camilla, welcome Soumya. Good to have you over here. We'll go through a 20 to 25-minute presentation and then open the floor to questions. Yeah, and I'll be here. So Swarna is also over here to help you if there are any questions. If you have any other questions. Camilla, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. First of all, I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for having us. I do love that the fact that this is a full circle moment. You came to one of our events, and now we're here with this amazing opportunity to share not only the research, but this amazing pilot project that has now expanded and it's growing to become a real potential. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen. And please let me know once you can see it, and then I can start with my presentation.
Yeah, it's visible.
Okay, perfect. Before I begin, I also would love to encourage you all to just talk to me and Soumya and Vepvi in the chat while I'm presenting. Since we are a small group, I see that as an opportunity to really bring us together and be closer. And then talk about the theories and then also the implications and how this project was conducted in Faridabad. So please feel free to interact with us in the chat. As As I was introduced, my name is Camilla. I'm the Tech and Data Product Manager. I was born and raised, and I'm currently based in Brazil. It is 8:30 a.m. Thank you so much for having us again. And it is a pleasure of me to be speaking to you about our project and our paper From Shadows to Solutions, a kaleidoscopic approach to safety here at the International Political Science Association. Um, so let's begin. So, as this working group knows, since you are all focused on gender and we're focused on gender, according to UN Women, 1 in 3 women will suffer sexual and gender-based violence at least once in their lifetimes. And that is for the whole world. And when we narrow it down to one country, India, we're talking about 31% of the Indian population who have claimed and said that they have faced violence at least once. And that is gender-based violence. Of course, by itself, the issue of gender-based violence is an immense problem. But here, I would love for us to focus on this other issue that is that 80% of the cases of sexual and gender-based violence are not reported to the authorities. What does that lead from a data perspective, from a researcher perspective? What it means is that when we say 1 in 3 women or 31% of the Indian population, those statistics are biased because on a sample size of 20% of what is reported. 80% of survivors live in silence and they do not report it to the authorities because they don't want to, or they don't even know that they can report. What happens is that this creates an institutional data gap that makes the problem invisible. And as mentioned before, we have a tool, Red Dot Foundation has a tool that makes that invisible really, really visible through hotspots on a map. So you really know what's going on in your location. And that platform is called Safe City. So Safe City is an anonymous, safe, and accessible way of reporting sexual violence. And currently we have over 86,000 unique incidents shared from 86 countries. As of last night, that number is over 90,000 incidents of sexual and gender-based violence. We are an open data source of visualization and analytics that help explain the problem at a local level. If you direct your attention to the image on the right, that is what our app looks like. And this is an image of New York City. And you can see all these red dots, these red clusters with numbers on them. As you zoom in, you can see exactly the location of where that incident happened. What does that allow is that it allows us to shift the focus from the survivor to the location. And what does that do is that it increases individual and community engagement and institutional accountability because now we can pinpoint where violence is happening at an exact time, at an exact location, whether that is close to a market, through a university, to a bus station, to a metro station. We're able to look at violence from a different perspective. So, with all of that being said, what are we researching? So, our main research question was, how is Safe City a key tool in addressing underreporting of violence and therefore allowing for a new approach to justice to be considered? So, while I was speaking, I touched a few points of how Safe City can address that underreporting. So, really, the focus of this research was understanding how that speaking and that breaking of silence really allows for a new approach to justice to be considered. For this research, we used mainly two theoretical frameworks. The first one was of stochastic governance by Sanders and Skepke from 2017. And in this theory, they talked about the understanding the fact that datafication can be used in understanding social behavior, and predictive policing can use these methods to identify targets for police intervention with the goal of preventing crime. So what does that is telling? What is that telling us? That's telling us that by using data and using data-centric approaches, police and governments can be more efficient as to how they act to prevent crime. And prevention here is a really key word because we're not talking about redressal, we're talking about preventing future cases from happening. And we compare that or overlapped that with another theory called kaleidoscopic justice by McLean in West Maryland from 2019. And this theory comes with a new approach to justice systems that is sexual and gender-based violence survivor centric and focuses on 6 pillars for justice. Those are consequences, recognition, dignity, voice, prevention, and connectedness. In other words, what does kaleidoscopic justice talks about? Kaleidoscopic justice talks about how in the current justice system that we have all over the world, justice is very linear, right? So you have a crime happens, and then police addresses that crime, a perpetrator gets judged. If that crime gets judged and that perpetrator is guilty, the perpetrator is going to go to jail, and that is it. Maybe the survivor will receive some form of money or some form of redressal for what happened. And that works really well when we're talking about ransom, when we're talking about robbery, when we're talking about different types of violence. But when we talk about sexual and gender-based violence, and remembering that sexual and gender-based violence is a spectrum of abuse, starting from microaggressions such as ogling, such as eve teasing, such as following, um, groping, catcalling, up until the other side of the spectrum where we have physical abuse, rape, and domestic violence. We're not talking about a linear violence. So therefore, we need a non-linear, or in other ways, a kaleidoscopic approach to justice, in which the focus is on consequences and clear consequences for that type of violence. But most importantly, a recognition of that survivor, a dignity for that survivor, a voice for that survivor, prevention so that does not happen again, and connectedness so all of these things are happening together. While these two theories work really well on their own, the gaps between the current legal framework and the needs of sexual and gender-based violence survivors continues to widen because of that issue that I talked about in a few slides back. Because data is not there. The governments do not have data. The police does not have data on survivors' needs. And in return, survivors lose trust in the legal framework and in justice systems. So what we're arguing here is that by putting stochastic governance and overlapping that with kaleidoscopic justice and using Safe City and Red Dot Foundation, Safe City as a tool, Red Dot Foundation is able to identify patterns of unsafety, provide trainings and workshops for the police and the community, and that led to identification of threats through data, community engagement, and institutional accountability. I know that all sounds so much right now, so I'm gonna break it down. So, how did we do that? How did we overlap these two things? We had a point to prove. We decided to do that through our Safer Faridabad project. So through Safe City, Red Dot Foundation was able to use technology to connect, collect, analyze, and visualize thousands of anonymous cases of sexual and gender-based violence. The project of Safer Faridabad aimed to study public spaces in Faridabad, and the project was conducted from October to March 2024 in 2 locations of Faridabad with the goal of collecting narratives, analyzing trends of crimes, and based on that location, foster awareness and provide justice through a kaleidoscopic lens. So how did we do that? We implemented this project into 4 phases. The first phase was a qualitative and quantitative baseline survey and safety audit. So we talked to over 2,000 people on their perceptions of safety in Faridabad. We got all of that data, and our data team and our data vetting team read through every single case And through an extensive data analysis, the data related to cases of SGBV were cleaned and imported into our Safe City database for further analysis. Based on that, we were able to give several data-driven insights to our local outreach team, which then was able to craft and create a curriculum for both training of community and the police. So based on those, phase 3 was based on those data-driven insights. A series of interventions were conducted to educate the community on SGBV and the police officers on bystander intervention and empathetic listening. So we understood that the community did not want to speak about violence because either they did not know that what they were suffering was violence, so they needed that type of education, or they needed a type of education that was to understand that it was okay for them to talk about violence. There were safe spaces where they could talk about it. And for the police was understanding where the community was feeling unsure about reporting, tackling those issues, and that came through bystander intervention and empathetic listening. And after 3 months of collecting data and conducting these workshops and trainings, we came back to these two regions in Faridabad and surveyed the community again, not the same people, but the same in the same region. And we surveyed them on their perceptions of safety and what were some of the improvements that they saw in that community. So by completing this full circle, Red Dot Foundation was able to identify a data gap between the police reports and community on safety. And by integrating analytical results from Safe City with the police department, Red Dot Foundation was able to provide actionable insights that led to an increased safety perception in the community. So talking about our findings. So the first step was the safety audit. What did we find there? We found 4 main types of violence being mostly reported by the community. Those were cases of stalking, of ogling, of domestic violence, and a really large number of others. And by doing a descriptive analysis of what those others were, we found that a lot of people were feeling unsafe due to looting, alcohol, and drug consumption in public spaces. We also saw that the peak incidents were at 12 p.m., 3 p.m., 6 p.m., and 9 p.m. Those timings make a lot of sense when we talk about transit, travel times, or university and work schedules, which meant that people were suffering violence on their way to or from work or on their way to and from university, which meant that violence was happening on the street. People were suffering that type of violence, stalking, ogling, feeling unsafe due to alcohol and drug consumption when they were on their way from point A to point B. And then from domestic violence, this is our 9 p.m. peak. That is when people get back home and then they find their partners drunk. They find their partners complaining about dinner or complaining about some other type of issue, which generates and leads to violence. We also saw that 18 to 25-year-olds were more likely to report verbal and nonverbal types of violence, whereas older age groups reported higher rates of domestic violence. What that led to our understanding was that really that gap in education. Of course, violence does not stop happening once you reach a certain age, right? Stalking doesn't stop, ogling doesn't stop, but your recognition that that is violence, that might end or that might not be there. So you face this so many times throughout your life that you're not even recognizing that that is something that you would consider violence. So that was a major gap for us to really try to understand where the community was coming in from. Another really important statistic that is very correlated with that first one that I talked about was that 78% of the survivors did not and said that they would not report their incidents to the police. So they had no intention to talk to a police officer about what was happening to them. And on the other side, when we surveyed the police and their interest in understanding SGBV, we found that only 7% of the police officers desired a training on SGBV, and 57% said that they were familiar with domestic violence laws, but not sexual harassment laws. that really showed us that there was also a gap within the police force of understanding the importance of talking about all different types of violence and how do you approach all types of violence. There's also a notion that is really important is that the police force or the law enforcement, they're there to enforce the law. And if the law is not clear about different types of SGBV, the police won't know how to act. And that was a really important step for us to take into consideration. And then more in terms of um, qualitative findings, when we talked to the community, we understood that there was a big notion around the connection of violence, sexual and gender-based violence, and offense to modesty. So due to a lot of cultural stereotypes of women needing to be modest, when that was not met, when a woman would arrive home at a later time, so we see that in the 9 p.m. peak, if that is considered late by their family members, by their husbands, then violence becomes normalized. Oh, they were not being modest enough. If they were going out with a clothing that is not considered to be modest, then that violence kind of got justified. So we really understood that we needed to tackle that type of perception in the community. We also saw that type of perception within the police force. The police officers tended to mimic these reactions to modesty and blame the survivor and used questionings that were not empathetic. They were using words such as, but why were you drunk? Or why were you wearing that? Why were you out so late? And these were all related to a good woman would be home early. A good woman wouldn't wear that type of clothing. And based on that perception, an offense to modesty was a big one. And even when we talk about the law, even with the new law in India, with the reformed law, the word of modesty and that offense to modesty continues to be there for cases of SGBV. So that notion of offense to modesty really gets justified in all senses. So we needed, and we knew that we needed to train the police and train the community to break that wall of modesty and understand that a woman is free to walk wherever she wants to walk. A woman is free to wear what she needs and wants to wear. And our impact, we saw that by integrating data collection with the training in that post survey, the community quickly saw improvements in their sense of safety in that region. So the community started to notice that they could feel more confident to talk about it. They felt that there were safe spaces to have these conversations. And after that period of 3 months, we asked people if they would be willing to report to the police. We saw a 33% increase in that answer being yes, which 33% is still not the ideal number. Of course, we want that number to be 100%, but we were at zero. And then 3 months later, we saw that 33% increase. So that was really, really positive, which meant that the police and the community were starting to trust each other again. So, in terms of analysis and conclusion, we can separate all of these findings into two categories. The first one is the datization of the local issue, or going back to our theoretical framework of stochastic governance. So, police officers noted that the data helped them act. They knew where to go, they knew exactly where the points were, and they knew exactly what was happening. For example, we had two main areas that were considered unsafe. One was the NIT area, which is the new industrial region in Faridabad, and the other one was a BK Chowk area, which is a more of like a market and domestic area. So we saw patterns of movements that were different, patterns of violence that were different for these two locations. So the police knew how to act and where to act better. On the community side, the community also emphasized that that data-driven intervention really helped them to feel safer and helped them to feel secure because they now also knew where violence was happening. So, in a conclusion, Safe City really was able to shift policing to be more proactive in prevention, and allowed the community to engage and collaborate for those safer spaces, whether that is starting a conversation, whether that is continue to report or continue to talk to each other. That allowed for a beginning of a safer space to be created in these two locations. And the second theme was empathetic listening. Survivors didn't realize that they could report incidents, and some even blamed themselves or had a whole community around them telling them that they were to blame. They were offending their modesty, they were offending their marriage. So they didn't even know that they could. Whenever they were cackled, when they were stalked, when they were ugled, they were offending, they deserved that. So that through empathetic listening and through a lot of conversation, we started to shift that a little bit. And then when it comes to the police, we sat with them. We did a lot of playing exercises in which they had to really listen to what the survivor was telling them, and by doing that, we were able to provide that pillar of voice and that pillar of recognition that kaleidoscopic justice requires. So, Red Dot Foundation's kaleidoscopic approach really emphasizes the importance of justice through voice, recognition, and dignity, and really empowered survivors' perspectives and voice. And we were able to even bring the police force to enforce that type of new justice system. And then some other outcomes of this. So this project was conducted last year, and ever since that, we have expanded this project, and now we're conducting the same safety audit in 8 districts in Haryana with 10,000 stories being collected. We have also exported this model outside of India, and we're now conducting the same type of safety audit in Manchester with the support of the police and the survivor authorities. And then, from a more intrinsic perspective, the police officers have reported that they gained more autonomy and they are reporting misbehavior within the police force. So, if they see another police officer misbehaving or treating a survivor badly, they speak up. They are not keeping silence and they're educating other peers on how to do empathetic listening. The police constables are now going into the field and talking to the survivors. So in the first project in Faridabad, our team, Red Dot Foundation's team, went into the ground and collected those stories and talked to the survivors. Now, police officers are going on the ground in civilian uniform, in just normal clothing, and talking to people, talking to survivors as if they were friends, and they're now being able to listen through an empathetic lens and listen and really understand what people are facing. They're understanding the issue from a ground level. That is ensuring a better police approach and more trust. And again, we have seen an increase in 33% of official police reports. So, all of that to say, and go back to our research question, how is Safe City a key tool in addressing the underreporting of violence and therefore allowing for a new approach to justice to be considered? Well, with all of that, we can come back to this question and say that Safe City, as a tool to report and analyze sexual and gender-based violence, it becomes the basis for this new approach that is both data and survivor centric. By collecting these anonymous data and generating powerful insights, Safe City gives Red Dot Foundation the ability to present this new information that the police does not have access to. And through trainings, through workshops, through conversations, we're able to foster collaboration for a survivor and data-centric approach to safer spaces. So I do hope that was interesting. Thank you so much for listening. I would love to invite also Somya for this next segment as she was on the ground. I was just looking at the data. And yeah, we're open to any questions that you might have for us. Thank you.
Soumya? Thank you so much, Camilla. Shall I wait for Soumya to jump in or?
Hi, Jitu. I'm
Yeah.
here. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so I think Camilla summarized it really like amazingly, beautifully presented. And it made me so happy to hear her like talk about the entire project and the theories and frameworks. Um, I can just like add on here with the perspective of the field work that we did, the audit that we did on the field. Initially, it was really like difficult to get people to open up, and Faridabad is also like a very, very small, like rural sort of town. Inside that, with the help of police, we located these places where we wanted to conduct the survey and audit in Kheripul and Palla and NIT zone, and we picked up these locations based on the surrounding and the environment of these areas. Like they are surrounded by neighborhoods, offices, communities, colleges. Basically, we wanted people of all sort, like all different types of who are in different types of professions and who are in different age groups, who are doing different types of work. And we really wanted the audit to be conducted in a place where we get like a holistic response, and the group is varied, and it's not just one segment of people or one type of people who are responding to the audit. And initially it was really like difficult to get into the feet of how do you talk about something that's so sensitive while you're on a public walk essentially. More often than not, even including me, if somebody comes and stops me on the road for like a 5-minute survey on say policy or washing machine, I would not have the time or energy to sort of respond to them. I would be much more quicker at dismissing and walking away. But through this exercise, being on this end where we wanted the data to sort of uh, get these answers out, it was trial and error till we figured it out, till we understood that this is how it works and this is how it starts. The first thing I think that was key in getting people to respond was assuring them of confidence, like assuring them that their anonymity is preserved. We are not taking and we're not collecting any names, any contact numbers, so the survivor cannot be traced back essentially. So everything that they're sharing is anonymous. It's only if they've been harassed, in which public space or private space have they been harassed, and how did they respond to it. The first was this, that we are not taking any of your contact numbers, so please don't worry, this is not like we can't like look for you again, so just, and this is why we're doing it. And slowly it became more quicker. As soon as we started understanding how people feel comfortable, we started telling them that, hey, like this is safe city and this is what we do. The data that we're collecting here will compoundingly add on, and the solutions and frameworks that are built across this with the police authorities will benefit all of you people if we are successful in this. And the inconvenience of it would be that you give us 5 or 10 minutes of your time to sort of engage with us in the survey and interview process. And that's how we did it. We were 5 or 6 constables, police constables on ground, and 2 like Red Dot Foundation members on ground. We would just walk around every day in the same public spaces. The people also started recognizing us, that, oh, the shopkeepers, and they would just recognize and smile at us. Which is why even like doing the endline survey was easier, because it was a closed group in terms of the space that we had picked up. So people had already seen us for 3 or 4 months, and that's how they knew that, oh, this is the work that they're doing. There was enough assurity and credibility in who we were. It was not like flaky in their heads anymore. So I think the on ground work was good and impactful. And yeah, I hope that gives you perspective. I'm also like uh, excited to hear your thoughts, comments, and questions.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Camilla, for that, wonderful overview, and thank you, Soumya, for adding on to those. I'll just open the floor to the audience if they have any questions. And yeah, Uditi or anybody, let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, then I'll just go ahead and ask if, yeah. Soumya, I mean, if you can just, if it is possible, right? I mean, I know that this is um, a very triggering topic as well. Was there, would you be able to share a story where, I mean, as you were going around collecting data and trying to convince people, change their mindset about how Safe City app is useful and all that, was there any particular story that stands out to you? Where the Safe City app actually brought a difference, if that is something that you can share,
Uh,
because with anonymity.
yes, Jitu. I think because it's like remember the feeling so strongly that I can share a story. Anonymity is preserved because I myself don't know like where the woman is or what her name is. That's not what we asked her of. But in Faridabad, there was this woman who was running like a chai samosa stall, tea stall on the side of the road. And she had three like small children alongside her, one 5 years of age, one 6, and one 7. Three children who were just like running across her, around her. And I was just walking, and that day I was alone on the like in that area. I was alone, so I was just walking, and I sat down to drink some water, and I started talking to her. I was not essentially looking at her to do the survey, but when I saw like three children around her, and there was a casual like flow of conversation that started happening, and she was like, "Kya kar rahe ho aap yahan?" And like, "What are you doing here? Why are you sitting here?" Like, it's not a. It was getting like darker in the evening. I had to like wait for my transport and go back, and that conversation in itself, it brought up so much for her essentially. So she was in a very like abusive relationship, and her partner would come back home after like 2 or 3 months, and he would drink, and he would beat her, and he would take all the money that she had earned and run away, and then come back again in 2 or 3 months. And this kept happening till once what happened was he came and he hit her with a stick like rod on her leg, and she showed me the marks that were there on her feet. um and that's when she went to the police actually to ask for help. But before she could go to the police, her husband went to the police, and they complained against the woman that she's insane, or do not listen to her. She will make these stories up, etc., etc. But she was like, I can't make this wound up on my leg, no. And when she thought that there was no space for the police to listen to her, for her husband to listen to her, the only solution that she found herself in was uh, picking up the children and leaving that space and just sort of like vanishing from her house. And so this new like place that she was in, where I found her, she had this small shop, and she was making samosas and all for a living. And she was trying to like make lives better for her children. She told me that the children, all three of them, the school fees that goes towards their school is 500 rupees, which is a lot for a person who's a single mother who is in a situation like that, and she has a small like one room accommodation for herself and all her three children. And then when she heard the work that Safe City does, Red Dot does, um, it did not like directly impact or provide her relief in that very moment. I'm very sure of it because she mentioned it. But what changed my perception of like the purpose of the project was that when she expressed that there was probably not one person in her life who had sat with her to understand her story or speak to her about the story. And this was the first time somebody sat with her without like, there was no urgency. It took the entire conversation was like 15-20 minutes. And she asked me up, can you help me more than this? Can you do something like this? And we did tell her that we can we can provide you resources, we can tell you where to go, what police station to go, and we mentioned all of that. The most important part for her was just being heard and being like validated and seen that this makes sense, what she did was right, and what she's doing for her children is right. And yeah.
Thank you so much, Soumya. I think that actually, captures how important it is to know that you're not alone. I mean, when you're sharing your stories, when everybody has these kind of personal experiences, they think that they're alone. When yeah, societal wise they are, but then they understand that there are other women also who can support them. And I think her meeting you that day was indeed powerful for both you and for her. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you for seeing, I mean, showing us how that made a difference. Camilla, if I can just ask you if I can ask you a question, if there's no other questions. Uditi, do we have any questions?
I don't think so. Not yet.
Okay, all right, thank you. So, Camilla, my next, question would be to you. If, you spoke about the stochastic governance and the kaleidoscopic justice frameworks and all that you've used, and said that it offers a fresh lens for addressing, the SGBV. Uh, you know, and you're now looking to apply the lessons learned from this study in Manchester. Do you see these frameworks? They can be practically applied to shift cultural stereotypes and patriarchal norms in contexts where survivors face blame, like and I'm talking from an intersectional perspective, right? So this you've taken a case from India, and India itself is very diverse. So do you see what could be a prime challenge when you're applying your lessons learned, basically? And what would you change when you're taking the lessons learned from Faridabad to Manchester?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. Um, I think in regards to the theories themselves, both theories, they are focused on looking at the data and listening to survivors. And if you combine these theories and then focus on really listening to what survivors are saying, what the community is saying, that is something that can be applied anywhere in the world because you're taking the step of I am going to listen to you and your needs, and then I'm going to act. Um, what we're doing in Manchester was we took the structure of the four phases, right? We started with a safety audit, we did some preliminary data analysis, and now we're building that second segment of what we can offer the community. And of course, there are spaces, the things are different. For example, in Manchester, in India, in Faridabad, we were able to scale really fast with volunteers. People were willing to go in the streets and talking to other people. In Manchester, volunteers and that type of operational aspect did not work. People were more confident in if they saw a, a student group posting about it on social media, they're fine on going, clicking, and then answering the survey. If they saw that on email, they're fine on going and checking it out. We've been working with local cafes, local libraries, as a way to collect the data or get those stories through a more unpersonal way. So in India, that person one-on-one touch was really important. And then here, we saw in Manchester, we saw that if you go and talk to people, they're just not gonna want to talk to you. So that was the main difference, and I think that is where the kaleidoscopic approach really comes in because you really have to listen to what the survivors from that location need. Um, it might be that in India, the main redressal mechanism would be for, as we saw, it was, education. We want to be heard. We want to go to the police station and not hear that we are to blame. We want to feel welcome. And it might be that in Manchester, if the approach or what the survivors want is, we want a space that is women's only. We don't know yet what they will want. But what I'm saying at the end of the day is that by using the lens of first I hear what you want and then I act, that makes this project and this model really replicable anywhere in the world.
Thank you. Yeah, Uditi.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. I would have turned my video on, but it's been raining here today, so bear with me, please. My question is more centered around impact and feedback. So, what kind of feedback loops exist between survivors, the tech platform, and law enforcement? And, like you said, people
you have to protect their anonymity. So are survivors ever informed of how their input and their stories contribute to systemic change? Lastly, have you also maybe noticed any behavioral changes? I know this was just a pilot program, but during that, did you notice any changes in community members or even police enforcement agencies, law enforcement agencies?
Yeah, thank you. I'm gonna answer the first part, and then the behavioral part, I'm gonna let Somia talk about that because she was on the ground with them. So the first segment in terms of feedback loops. Yeah, so we protect people's anonymity and when and their personal information, and the best way to do that, the best way we found to do that is to not ask who they are, right? We're here to understand your story, and if you don't feel comfortable telling me who you are, I don't want that information. Um, and our main priority focus has always been on the location. So on, for example, in Faridabad, if I remember or recall top of mind, one of the main areas was a BK Chowk, as I mentioned. So that was one area where we found a lot of violence and we found a lot of stories. Then, when we were doing the post program, we surveyed in that location again. It might not be the same people, we might not be talking about the same people, but we're talking about a safe space. And that goes into the notion of what a space is and what a place is. So there is this theory that I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to quote or cite the correct source, but I think the author's name is Ahmad. It is a theory from 2012, if I'm not wrong, in which there is a definition of what a space is and what a place is. So a place is a physical location. It is that street. If that street is empty, that is a place. A space is when you add people, and it's when you add culture, is when you add other things to it. So whenever we do a safety audit of a space, we're of course focusing on that location, but what's the culture around that location? What's the overall environment of that location? So that is how we did that. And in the second half of your question, in terms of did we tell them how did their stories impacted? Not their stories or connected how did you what you said changed this, but more on an overall larger scale perspective of I heard you at that moment. It was very much like I'm hearing you, I'm so sorry that this is happening. So you're there on an empathetic way, as Somia talked about this impact story, right? She was there talking to this woman and understanding her whole story. She was listening. So going to kaleidoscopic justice, that really means Somia gave that survivor a space to be recognized. And then sometimes that is all they need. But then taking that and then placing posters in other locations and talking about safety in different ways, that also supported that survivor. And in Manchester, what we started to do was if people wanted to know what was going to happen in that location, they could sign up and then join a WhatsApp group. Uh, One thing that we noticed is that 95% of people don't want to know about it. And it's not bad. It just shows us that it is they just want to share. They just want to get that out of their body, out of that system, right? But of course, we're also giving that space for them, and they will see some impact whenever a police officer is more empathetic or whenever there is more care around that place and that space. But Somia, over to you for the second half.
Yes. Thanks, Camilla. Uh, so moving on, I think when the perception that we saw with people sharing their stories and it adding up to like some sort of value and their anonymity being preserved, I think one of them is visibility. That a lot of them survivors felt that sharing their stories, even anonymously, helped them to reclaim some value and some dignity when their experiences were just heard and talked about. Uh, Another thing that we observed was that there was a collective like change in the narrative. People believed that their stories were part of a larger pattern and would help in bringing about a compounding change when we had good enough numbers to it. Nobody understood the collective change part of it when they were just 1 month stories, but when Safe City was explained and when the quantity and quality of data, like the amount of it was explained, they understood that. A small like example to this specific pointer would be that during one of the trainings, during one of the school trainings, interventions that we did in college, um, the participants in the classroom, the peers in the classrooms, when they heard stories from their like other classmates, it was a new like experience for them. They were shocked that they had never spoken about this or heard about this from the people that they would study with every single day. This sort of like sparked solidarity, and they started understanding in those intervention classes that this has a larger impact and there would be a collective change when everybody would come together. And a lot of them also felt that their stories would fuel systemic changes. Safe City has been a catalyst to this change before also. One project in Delhi led to us like painting a public washroom. The washroom, there were stories of like people just staring, men staring at women outside the washroom, and a simple like ingenious solution to it was just going to the washroom and painting like big eyes on the wall of the washroom. When there were like big eyes painted on the wall, people stopped collecting there. So the intervention essentially was like no cost, very efficient and effective. And all it took was like 10 or 20 stories that actually told us that the problem was here. People felt that they were being stared at. If we did not have the data, this sort of solution would also not have come up or come across. Um, Post the entire like survey, the behavioral changes that we saw on the field, uh, from like police perspective, one was after like role playing activities and workshops and focused training that the police officers received, they showed a greater level of like patience, understanding, and non-judgmental like attitudes when dealing with survivors or victims. And there was a difference in how women constables showed up and how men like constables showed up. And when they were all put in the same room, the discussions in itself sparked a new like space for all of them to talk of what they think is right and wrong. And I think that helps in fueling like change. The second is a lot of residents also started like trusting that they have to speak, that they have to share and speak up. The endline survey that we did, it showed that I think 33% is what Camilla mentioned exactly, wanted to report and wanted to report to the police if something like that happens, and they would not think of certain types of crimes and violence as trivial. Instead of like because one more data that helped us to come to this conclusion was that on one day in Faridabad, they had received like 54 complaints in the police chowki. Out of the 54 of them, 47 were for domestic violence. Now it was very like, it's very evident in like even if I just close my eyes and think that that's not the entire like crime rate that happened in Haryana or Faridabad during that day and during that time. That brought out a keen perspective as to how people uh, can dismiss certain types of harassment as trivial and not report like crimes such as stalking or commenting or whistling to the police. And they would only report if the crime is like domestic violence or assault or rape. And so there was also a shift in community like perception. When the audit was being done, people were also encouraged to report all sorts of crime. And several community members started sharing and started feeling safer and more supported when they started speaking up about these incidents. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Soumya. I think we are nearing the end of this session, so might have to wrap up quickly. But I might, just a thought to leave, the audience or both of you out there as well. I mean, I think one of the things that I was interested in was the fact that, there was a higher reporting among the 18 to 25-year-old women. So, I'm hoping that, that is something that we can take away from here as well, about how youth-led prevention campaigns or support initiatives can truly resonate with the lived realities and vulnerabilities of different age groups and communities. So if there's any other questions or not, then I'll just go forward with closing this wonderful session. Uditi, do we have any other questions?
No, we don't know.
Okay, thank you. So, thank you so much, Camilla. Thank you so much, Soumya. And to the audience, as we draw close to this deeply impactful session on sexual and gender-based violence, it has truly been a privilege to moderate and listen to the insights that both of you shared. My heartfelt thanks goes to both of you for bringing such crucial perspectives and practical experiences to the forefront. And what we have explored here today goes right to the heart of a challenge that remains hidden, and that is the pervasive underreporting of SGBV, right? As we heard, a staggering 80% of the incidents aren't reported. And the silence that Safe City is valiantly trying to break. So, and we've come face to face with the enduring impact of cultural stereotypes and patriarchal norms, and it's truly disheartening to learn how incidents are often blamed on survivors for things like being late from work, normalizing harassment, and an offense to modesty. But sadly, we also know that police officers also mirrored these dialogues, right? And blaming survivors or using unempathetic questioning. And this underscores why, how important it is the work that you're doing. And within these challenges, we found the hope that Safe City brings. And I'm hoping that you carry the work forward and others see the hope that Safe City and the Red Dot Foundation is doing. Once again, thank you for your powerful call to action and reminding us that data, empathy, and community engagement are not just abstract concepts, but critical tools in our ongoing fight for safety and justice. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you again. Have a good day. Have a good evening. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.